Hello, Stallions, and welcome back to our mini lesson on making connection. This week we are focusing on text to world connections. So these are connections between a book or some sort of piece of text and events that are happening in the real world. So when you are reading this piece of text, it can be a story, an article, or any sort of text, and you make a connection to something happening in the real world, you're thinking in your head, what does this remind me of that is happening in the real world? And how are the text and the real life event similar or different? And what connections can I make between them so that I can get a better understanding of what it is that I'm reading? So when we're looking at a text to world connection, it's very easy to get it confused with text to self because a lot of times we find ourselves experiencing these real life events. So you have to think instead of the way you would in text to self, you're thinking I, me, my. So you're thinking yourself, your emotions, your feeling, your point of view with these connections. In a text to world connection, you have to think they, them, and others. So you're thinking about the world and people outside of you. So how are these things affecting the world, affecting the country, your city, your state, your town? So you're thinking of other people versus yourself. So let's get started with our I do. All right, so just like when we were making text to self connections, we are going to be using the making connections with Wonder graphic organizer, but in this one, it has a text to world section. So very similar process. We're going to choose text evidence of what the text says, put it in this section. Then we're going to move on to the text to world section. This reminds me of, and this is where you fill in the real world event that the text reminds you of. And then down here, the last piece is this connection helps me to understand the text, and you explain how the real world connection to the text helps you to understand how the characters are feeling or the scenario that is taking place. So let's get started with the I do. The first text to world connection I was able to find was in the chapter called Weird Kids, and it was down in this paragraph where it says, no one was talking to him, everyone was staring at him, all the girls at my table were whispering about him. He wasn't the only new kid at Beecher Prep, but he was the only one everyone was talking about. Julian had nicknamed him the Zombie Kid, and that's what everyone was calling him. Did you see the Zombie Kid yet? Stuff like that gets around fast, and August knew it. It's hard enough being the new kid even when you have a normal face. Imagine having his face. So I'm going to copy that and put it over in my graphic organizer. Now that I've gone ahead and put my text evidence in the text says box, I'm going to move on to the text to world box. This reminds me of, so the connection I was able to make was when President Obama became the first African American president of the United States. Many people had their doubts and mean things to say about him. However, just like Augie, he was there to serve a purpose. So in Augie's case, he was there at Beecher Prep to be a student, and in Obama's case, he was there to serve a purpose as the president. That was his job. So both of them were in a place that made them uncomfortable, and people had lots of stuff to say about them, but they were both there to serve a primary purpose. So after I've made my connection and I've explained what it reminded me of, this connection helps me to understand the text by explaining or better helping me to understand that the treatment that both Augie and President Obama received from some people, because remember, not everyone was rude and or mean to them, was not their fault, but rather the fact that people are afraid of something new. So in Augie's case, it was the first time that many of those students were seeing a deformed person, and they were more afraid of him than they were interested in being his friend and actually finding out who he was as a person. Same thing with President Obama. Many people were afraid of the fact that there was an African American president in the White House for the first time, and instead of voting for him and giving him a chance and giving him the benefit of the doubt, they decided that they would vote against him, which is fine because everyone's open to have their own opinion. And they doubted him before he even had a chance to prove himself. So I came to the point that people are afraid of something new. New, strange things or people make others feel uncomfortable, and their reactions to these changes are not always positive. Sometimes it takes time and getting to know someone for who they are before you judge someone. So by making that connection, I was able to understand the feeling that both President Obama and Augie were having, and the experience that they were both having by being someone new, someone strange in a new environment. So now let's move on to the we do. The second text to world connection that I was able to make was in the chapter called The Plague. In this paragraph, where Summer explains that she finds out about a game called The Plague, and apparently it's one that's been going on all year long, and she explains it by saying anyone who accidentally touches August only has 30 seconds to wash their hands or find hand sanitizer before they catch the plague. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this text evidence and put it into my graphic organizer. After reading the Plague chapter, this reminds me of the COVID-19 pandemic that has affected and even infected many parts of the world. People are warned that the infection can spread by touching others, just like with Augie. So it is strongly suggested that everyone maintain a distance from other people and be sure to wash their hands or use hand sanitizer immediately after making contact with anyone else. So just like with Augie, it was said that with the COVID-19, you need to stay away from other people that may be infected or just other people in general, and be sure to wash your hands and use hand sanitizer so that you don't get infected if you do happen to touch someone who is infected. So I found this connection, and it's something that's affecting the world. So I want you guys to realize that with both the connections that I've made, I did not write something about my personal experience. I wrote about the entire world or about someone else. So I chose they, them, or others. So the first one, the connection I made was with the president. The second one was with the COVID-19 pandemic that's affecting the entire world. And just like with last week, I want you guys to go ahead and complete the third part of the we do. So I already put the evidence. I wrote down what the connection, what it reminded me of in the world. Now you need to write down what this connection helps me and you to understand while we are reading the text. For our final piece, we have the you do, and you guys are going to be using the text from this week's Read Aloud and filling in the text says box, making your own connection to something that's happening in the world, not to yourself, and then completing the final box where you write down what that connection between your real world event and the text helps you to understand while reading the text. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to send me a message and I will help you as best as I can. Good luck, guys.